If I place an old spark plug on the table, you might think it is only worth selling as scrap metal. But I want to try something completely different. Can a part that was originally designed to handle extreme pressure and heat inside an engine be brought back to life as a mini soldering iron that actually works? Don't take your eyes off this, because by the end of the video, we will test it with a real solder joint to see whether this idea succeeds or fails. First, I will prepare the electrical wiring for this homemade soldering iron. Strip off a section of insulation at the end of the wire to expose the copper core inside. Clean up each wire end, then twist it lightly so the copper strands do not fray. If the contact is loose, the soldering tip will heat up inconsistently. Now I twist this copper wire onto the end of the spark plug. There is no need to rush, because when it comes to electricity, a secure connection is always more important than looks. After securing one wire end, continue stripping the other end. Secure it in the correct position on the connector. Continue preparing another piece of wire. Strip the insulation from the wire end, then twist the copper core neatly. Place the wire into the contact position on the spark plug. Tighten it firmly and do not let the wire touch other metal parts randomly. This is a step that needs to be done slowly. Now I will reuse an old broken soldering iron. Remove the wooden handle first. This handle is still very useful because it helps insulate heat while working. In this experiment, the spark plug is not the main heating part. It is used as a heat-resistant holder, helping secure the carbon core at the tip of the soldering iron. The main heat is created at the tip of the carbon core when current passes through it. Wrap electrical tape around the spark plug to temporarily secure it. Insert the spark plug into the correct position of the handle. Then, press it in more firmly so the spark plug will not rotate during use. At this point, the shape of the soldering iron is starting to become clearer. Strip the remaining wire end. Then attach the wire to the alligator clip. The alligator clip makes the connection faster and more secure. While I am doing this, comment and tell me where you are from. I am very curious to know how far the content I share can reach. Before applying power, we will prepare the soldering tip. Instead of using an old soldering tip, I want to try reusing the carbon core inside an old battery. Note, only use a regular dry zinc carbon battery. Do not use lithium batteries. Rechargeable batteries, swollen batteries, leaking batteries, or batteries with a strange smell. Slowly separate the battery casing to take out the carbon core in the center. This is the part I want to reuse as the contact tip. The carbon core can handle heat fairly well, conduct electricity, and when shaped correctly, it can create a more compact soldering tip. Next, separate the thin metal shell on the outside. Cut this metal into small pieces to prepare the flux solution. Pour just enough solution into the cut metal pieces to create soldering flux. The purpose of the flux is to help the solder stick more easily to the metal surface. If the surface has oil rust or oxidation, the solder will have a very hard time bonding. Now let's go back to the carbon core. Insert the carbon core into the drill chuck. Use sandpaper to slowly shape the tip. Make it slightly pointed, but not too thin, If it is too sharp, the carbon tip can break easily when it touches metal. If it is too blunt, soldering will be harder to control accurately. All we need is a small, neat, and even tip. After shaping it, insert the carbon core into the end of the spark plug. Tighten the screw to secure it firmly. This is the moment to see whether all the work from the beginning of the video will actually pay off. I am using a 12-volt battery. Clamp the wires to the correct terminals. I will test it briefly, first bringing the homemade soldering tip close and not holding it there for too long. Now, I will test it on real metal. These are 2 old razor blades. Secure them so we do not have to hold them directly by hand. Bring the soldering tip in to heat the contact area. The solder point starts to bond to the edge of the metal. Now I try lifting it up and checking it. The solder joint has bonded, so the first test has shown a pretty good sign. Next, I will test it on a more practical item. This is a Vietnamese coffee filter with a loose handle. Many people would throw away a small item like this, but if it can be soldered back on, it can still be used. Place the handle back in its original position. Then, bring in the soldering tip and heat it. Work slowly, little by little. The joint needs to get hot enough for the 2 metal edges to bond tightly together. Now try tapping it hard against the table, then gently pulling the handle to check how strong it is. The result is very good. The solder joint is holding quite firmly. If it can solder this item, then this homemade soldering iron is not just working for fun. It can actually help repair small things around the house. But I still want to try a harder test. This time, it is a bolt and a nut. The metal surface is thicker and harder for solder to bond to, so this will be a clearer test of adhesion. First, take a little flux. Apply it to the area that needs to be soldered. Clean and moisten the contact surface. Place the solder wire right at the joint. Then, use the homemade soldering tip to heat it slowly. Do not rush. With thicker metal, it needs more time for the heat to transfer evenly into the surface. The solder begins to melt, then spreads around the contact area between the bolt and the nut. Keep the soldering tip steady for a few more seconds. This solder joint only shows that the homemade soldering tip can melt solder and help it bond to the surface. It does not replace arc welding, and it should not be used for load-bearing parts. After the solder joint cools down, we will check the finished result. From an old spark plug that seemed ready to be thrown away, it can now melt solder and repair a few small items. But for a DIY experiment, the result is definitely worth seeing. How many points would you give this homemade soldering iron? If it were you, what would you use it to repair first? Comment and let me know. And don't forget to subscribe and follow the channel, so we can explore more surprising recycling ideas together.